The wind moved low across the plains that morning, carrying dust and the smell of sage. Jacob Turner guided his horse slowly along the edge of the creek, scanning the ground the way years of ranch work had taught him. He wasn't hunting trouble, and he wasn't looking for glory. He was just a cowboy trying to make it through another hard season in the Arizona Territory. The land had been tense for months. Whispers of raids, broken treaties, and fear traveled faster than the wind. Most folks in town spoke of the Apache with clenched jaws and ready rifles. Jacob had heard the same stories, but he had also learned that fear often grew bigger than the truth. That was when he saw her. She was crouched near the creek bank, her movements slow, deliberate, as if every step cost her strength. Her dark hair hung loose and dusty around her shoulders, and her dress, once finely made, was torn and stained. She froze when she noticed Jacob, her eyes lifting to meet his. Jacob's hand moved toward his reins, instinct more than intention. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the creek water slipping over stones. She was Apache. There was no mistaking it. Jacob could have turned his horse around. That would have been the sensible thing. That was what everyone expected. But something in her posture stopped him. Not defiance, not anger, but exhaustion. She wasn't reaching for a weapon. She wasn't running. She looked like someone who had already lost too much. Slowly, Jacob lifted his hands away from his body, showing her he meant no harm. He dismounted, keeping his movements calm and open. His heart beat hard against his ribs, but he forced his voice to stay steady. "I won't hurt you," he said, though he knew she might not understand the words. She studied him carefully, reading his face the way people did when words failed. Her eyes were sharp but tired, filled with a guarded pain that cut deeper than any threat. Jacob reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. He set it on the ground between them and stepped back. After a moment, she moved forward, hesitation in every step, and drank. Her hands trembled as she did. That was all it took. Jacob didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. But in that moment, he knew he couldn't leave her there. He led his horse beside her and motioned for her to follow. She hesitated, then nodded once. That small gesture carried a weight that surprised him. His ranch sat miles from town, a lonely stretch of land with a small cabin and a weathered barn. He brought her there quietly, avoiding the main road. When they arrived, she stood at the edge of the property, unsure if she was crossing into safety or danger. Jacob showed her the cabin, offered food, and stepped outside to give her space. When he returned later, he found her sitting near the fire, her posture still tense but less defensive. Over the next days, they learned how to speak without sharing a language. He pointed to himself and said his name. She did the same. "Nige," she said softly. She had been separated from her people after a skirmish near the mountains. She didn't share every detail, but Jacob could see the grief etched into her expressions. Loss had shaped her, the way the land was shaped by wind and time. Jacob treated her the way he treated any guest, with respect. He brought blankets when nights turned cold, shared meals, and never asked more than she was ready to give. Slowly, Nige began to trust him. Trust grew in small moments. When she helped him mend a fence. When she laughed quietly at his clumsy attempts to pronounce Apache words. When she slept through the night without waking in fear. But kindness never stays hidden forever. One afternoon, Jacob rode into town for supplies. The men outside the general store were already talking when he arrived. Someone had seen an Apache woman near his land. "Careful, Turner," one of them said. "You don't know what kind of trouble you're inviting." Jacob didn't argue. He paid for his supplies and left, but the tension followed him home like a shadow. That night, he found Nige sitting by the fire, her expression alert. She could sense the shift. She asked him something in her language, her voice low and urgent. "You're safe here," he said, hoping his meaning carried through. But safety was fragile. A few days later, riders appeared on the horizon. Town men, armed and suspicious. Jacob stepped outside to meet them before they reached the cabin. They accused him of harboring an enemy. They spoke of danger, of loyalty, of lines that shouldn't be crossed. Jacob stood his ground. "She's not your enemy," he said. "She's just a woman who needs help." Their anger flared, but so did their uncertainty. Nige stepped out of the cabin then, lifting her hands as Jacob had done by the creek. Her calm presence changed the air. She spoke, her voice steady, even though most of them couldn't understand the words. But they understood her humanity. After a long silence, the men left. Not convinced, not friendly, but no longer ready to spill blood. The weeks that followed were quieter. Nige grew stronger. She began to talk about returning to her people someday. Jacob listened, knowing that kindness didn't mean possession. Before winter set in, a small Apache group appeared near the ranch. This time, there was no fear in Naichi's eyes, only relief. She spoke with them at length, then turned to Jacob. She thanked him, placing her hand over her heart. The gesture said more than words ever could. When she rode away with her people, Jacob stood by the fence, the plains stretching endlessly before him. He felt loss, but also something deeper, change. The land was still harsh. The world was still divided. But one act of kindness had bridged a gap that fear never could. And long after the dust settled, Jacob Turner carried that lesson with him. Sometimes the smallest mercy can change everything.